Tulips by Sylvia Plath. Structure, Summary, Analysis. Hello and welcome to the discourse. Tulips, composed on March 18, 1961, is one of Sylvia Plath's most celebrated and critically admired poems. It first appeared in the New Yorker in 1962 before being included in her posthumous collection Ariel. According to Ted Hughes, her husband, the poem was inspired by a bouquet of tulips Plath received while recuperating from appendectomy in the hospital. The poem reflects Plath's conflicted emotions about illness, identity, and the pressures of the outside world. The speaker, lying in a hospital bed, describes the sterile white environment as peaceful, almost like a blank slate, where she can escape life's demands. However, a bouquet of bright red tulips disrupts this tranquility, becoming an intrusive, almost violent presence. Tulips captures Plath's struggle between the desire for oblivion and the inescapable pull of life. The hospital offers a temporary escape, but the tulips, vibrant and insistent, force her back into the painful reality of existence. Structure of Tulips. Sylvia Plath's Tulips is structured in 9 stanzas, each composed of 7 lines, known as septates. This uniform division creates a sense of control, mirroring the sterile, ordered environment of the hospital where the poem is set. However, the poem's free-verse form, lacking a regular rhyme scheme or meter, introduces a tension between confinement and emotional turbulence. The absence of strict formal constraints allows Plath's voice to shift between detachment and raw intensity, reflecting the speaker's unstable mental state. While the poem does not adhere to a traditional metrical pattern, Plath employs subtle rhythmic variations to enhance its emotional impact. The lines vary in length and stress, alternating between short, abrupt phrases, I am nobody, and longer, flowing sentences. The water I taste is warm and salt, like the sea. This irregularity mimics the speaker's wavering between numbness and acute sensitivity. Additionally, Plath uses enjambment frequently, allowing thoughts to spill across lines, which reinforces the poem's stress of consciousness quality. Despite its free verse structure, Tulips is not without sonic cohesion. Plath employs assonance, consonance, and alliteration, white walls, winter light, red smears, to create a musical undercurrent. The poem's imagery and repetition, particularly of color white versus red, serve as structural anchors, contrasting the speaker's desire for blankness with the tulip's violent vitality. Ultimately, the form mirrors the poem's central conflict, the struggle between the quiet void of surrender and the insistent, painful return to life. In addition, Plath has used alliteration, accentation, juxtaposition, personification, metaphor, and simile in the poem. Summary of Tulips, stanza 1, lines 1 to 7. The tulips are too excitable. It is winter here. Look how white everything is, how quiet, how snowed in. I am learning peacefulness, lying by myself quietly. As the light lies on these white walls, this bed, these hands, I am nobody. I have nothing to do with explosions. I have given my name and my day clothes up to the nurses, and my history to the anesthetist, and my body to surgeons. The opening stanza of Tulips establishes the speaker's desire for emptiness and detachment in a sterile hospital environment. The tulips introduced immediately as too excitable disrupt the quiet winter scene, symbolizing the intrusion of life's vibrancy into the speaker's preferred state of numbness. The whiteness of the room, described as how quiet, how snowed in, suggests a blank, almost death-like calm, where the speaker attempts to dissolve her identity. I am nobody. She relinquishes control, surrendering her name, clothes, history, and body to medical professionals, reinforcing her wish to escape the burden of existence. The contrast between the passive, snow-like stillness and the aggressive vitality of the tulips sets up the poem's central conflict, the tension between oblivion and the painful return to self-awareness. Personification has been used. The tulips are given human-like energy, too excitable, making them seem invasive and almost threatening. This animates them as antagonists in the speaker's quest for peace. The whiteness symbolizes sterility, emptiness, and detachment, while the implied red of the tulips represents life, pain, and emotional intensity. The repetition of how emphasizes the speaker's fixation on stillness, while the parallel structure in the final lines underscores her systematic surrender of identity. The speaker uses metaphor to compare herself to the light lying passively on surfaces, reinforcing her desire for weightless anonymity. Stanza 2, lines 8 to 14. They have propped my head between the pillow and the sheet cuff, like an eye between two white lids that will not shut. Stupid pupil, it has to take everything in. The nurses pass and pass, they are no trouble. They pass the way girls pass, inland in their white caps, doing things with their hands, one just the same as another. So it is impossible to tell how many there are. In this stanza, the speaker describes her immobilized, passive state in the hospital, comparing her head to an eye forced to stay open between the pillow and sheet cuff. This unsettling image suggests helpless exposure. She is unable to shut out the world, compelled to observe everything like a stupid pupil. The nurses move around her with mechanical efficiency, their repetitive motions blending into anonymity, much like indistinguishable seagulls. Their sameness makes them almost ghostly, reinforcing the speaker's detachment and dehumanization in the clinical environment. The stanza underscores her powerlessness. She is an object being tended to, not an active participant in her own existence. The comparison of her head, simile to an eye between two white lids that will not shut, evokes a sense of forced witness, as if she is trapped in perpetual awareness. The nurses are likened to girls passing inland in their white caps, emphasizing their uniformity, transience, and impersonal nature. The repeated use of pass mimics the nurses' monotonous cyclical movements, reinforcing the tedium and depersonalization of hospital routine. Lines 15 to 21. My body is a pebble to them, they tend it as water tends to the pebbles it must run over, smoothing them gently. They bring me numbness in their bright needles, they bring me sleep. Now I have lost myself, I am sick of baggage. My patent leather overnight case like a black pillbox. My husband and child smiling out of the family photo. Their smiles catch onto my skin, little smiling hooks. This stanza delves deeper into the speaker's dissociation from her own body and identity in the sterile, impersonal hospital environment. She describes her body as a pebble smoothed by the indifferent, repetitive care of the nurses, who are likened to water, suggesting a natural but impersonal force that erodes individuality. The medical staff brings numbness and sleep, further detaching her from pain and consciousness. Yet this detachment comes at a cost. She feels she has lost herself, rejecting the trappings of her former life, sick of baggage. The line, now I have lost myself, I am sick of baggage, offers paradox, suggesting that shedding identity leaves her burdened by the remnants of her past. The overnight case, a symbol of transient superficial preparedness, seems as clinical and hollow as a black pillbox, hinting at death or medication. Even the smiling faces of her husband and child, typically symbols of love and connection, become invasive, their smiles like hooks that painfully latch onto her. This reveals her conflicted emotions. She resents the obligations and attachments that pull her back into a self she no longer wants to inhabit. This stanza powerfully captures the dehumanization of medical care and the ambivalence toward personal connections, portraying the speaker as both smoothed away and painfully snagged by the world she tries to escape. Lines 22 to 28. I have let things slip, a 30-year-old cargo boat, stubbornly hanging onto my name and address. They have swept me clear of my loving associations, scared and bare on the green plastic pillow trolley. I watched my tea set, my burials of linen, my books, sink out of sight, and the water went over my head. I am a nun now, I have never been so pure. In this stanza, the speaker reflects on the shedding of her former identity and material attachments, likening herself to an old cargo boat burdened by decades of personal history. Extended metaphor is used to suggest that her body, life, is a worn vessel weighed down by identity, name and address, and memories. The hospital's sterile procedures have swept her clear of emotional ties, leaving her sacred and bare, stripped down to mere existence. The image of watching her possessions, tea set, linen, books, sink out of sight evokes a symbolic drowning, as if her past life is being submerged and she is left in a state of void like purity. The domestic versus the clinical highlights the clash juxtaposition between personal history and institutional erasure. By declaring, I am a nun now, I have never been so pure, she embraces a paradoxical freedom in emptiness. The nun comparison suggests ascetic detachment but also hints at forced renunciation. Her purity comes not from spiritual devotion but from erasure. The stanza captures the tension between liberation and loss, as the speaker surrenders to a blank, medicalized non self. Lines 29 to 35. I did not want any flowers, I only wanted to lie with my hands turned up and be utterly empty. How free it is, you have no idea how free. The peacefulness is so big it dages you, and it asks nothing, a name tag, a few trinkets. It is what the dead close on, finally. I imagine them, shutting their mouths on it, like a communion tablet. This stanza crystallizes the speaker's yearning for absolute emptiness, a state of radical freedom she associates with death. She rejects the vibrancy of flowers, the tulips, desiring instead to lie motionless and blank, like a corpse with upturned hands. The peacefulness she craves is vast and undemanding, requiring no identity, a name tag, or possessions. The comparison to the dead, shutting their mouths on it like a communion tablet, is striking. Allusion has been used, just as the Eucharist symbolizes spiritual union in Christianity, her imagined death is a sacrament of oblivion, a final silent consumption of nothingness. The stanza underscores her conflict between longing for annihilation and the intrusive pull of life embodied by the tulips. Her desire for freedom is paradoxically a desire for self-erasure, a theme central to Plath's work. The irony is that the freedom she praises is the freedom of non-being, making her liberation inseparable from extinction. Lines 36 to 42. The tulips are too red in the first place, they hurt me. Even through the gift paper, I could hear them breathe, lightly, through their white swaddlings, like an awful baby. Their redness talks to my wound, it corresponds. They are subtle, they seem to float, though they weigh me down, upsetting me with their sudden tongues and their color, a dozen red lead sinkers round my neck. In this climactic stanza, the tulips transform from mere flowers into aggressive, almost monstrous presence, exacerbating to speaker's pain. Their too red hue is violently vivid against the sterile whiteness of the hospital. Hurting her like a physical wound, the imagery becomes visceral. She hears them breathe through their wrappings, comparing them to an awful baby, suggesting something alive, demanding and unsettling. The tulips talk to her wound, personification, implying a sinister symbiosis. Their redness mirrors her pain, as if they feed on her vulnerability. Though they appear to float, they paradoxically weigh her down, dragging her back into the world of sensation. The final simile, a dozen red lead sinkers round my neck, conveys drowning, as if the tulips are the anchors pulling her under, away from her desired emptiness. The color red, redness, symbolizes blood, pain, life force. It corresponds to her wound, merging her internal agony with the external world. Lines 43 to 49. Nobody watched me before, now I am watched. The tulips turn to me, and the window behind me, where once a day the light slowly widens and slowly thins, and I see myself flat, ridiculous, a cut paper shadow, between the eye of the sun and the eyes of the tulips, and I have no face, I have wanted to efface myself. The vivid tulips eat my oxygen. In this stanza, the speaker feels exposed and consumed by the tulip's relentless gaze. Previously unnoticed in her sterile hospital cocoon, she now feels scrutinized by the flowers, the shifting light, and even her own fragmented reflection. The tulips turn to her with an almost predatory awareness, while the window's light frames her as a cut paper shadow, a flat, lifeless silhouette stripped of depth and identity. The speaker's desire to efface myself clashes violently with the tulip's vivid presence, which metaphorically eats her oxygen. This suggests they are suffocating her, stealing the very air she needs to sustain her fragile existence. The stanza captures her crisis of selfhood. She is both observed and erased, caught between the tulips' invasive vitality and her own yearning for dissolution. Lines 50 to 56. Before they came, the air was calm enough, coming and going, breath by breath, without any fuss. Then the tulips filled it up like a loud noise. Now the air snacks and eddies round them the way a river snacks and eddies round a sunken rust-red engine. They concentrate my attention that was happy, playing and resting without committing itself. This stanza contrasts the tranquil emptiness the speaker once inhabited with the chaotic intrusion of the tulips. Before their arrival, the air was calm, moving gently with her breath without any fuss, a metaphor for her desired state of passive existence. But the tulips rupture this stillness, filling the air like a loud noise, an auditory assault on her quietude. Now the air snacks and eddies around the tulips, likened to a river disturbed by a sunken rust-red engine, a striking image of industrial decay. The tulips, like this submerged machine, are obtrusive, unnatural, and impossible to ignore. They force her attention, disrupting her previous containment in drifting, without committing itself, a phrase suggesting her reluctance to engage with life. The stanza underscores how the tulips hijack her consciousness, replacing her peaceful detachment with their garish, inescapable presence. Lines 57 to 63. The walls also seem to be warming themselves. The tulips should be behind bars like dangerous animals. They are opening like the mouth of some great African cat. And I am aware of my heart, it opens and closes, its bowl of red blooms out of sheer love of me. The water I taste is warm and salt like the sea, and comes from a country far away as health. In this climactic stanza, the speaker's psychological battle with the tulips escalates into a visceral, almost hallucinatory confrontation. The flowers are no longer mere plants, they become wild, predatory, and dangerously alive. The walls themselves seem to warm in response, as if the hospital room has been infected by their heat. The speaker's plea for the tulips to be behind bars reveals her terror. They are untamed beasts, their petals compared to the mouth of some great African cat, an image evoking primal danger, lions, leopards, and exotic, uncontrollable vitality. Zoomorphism has been used here. Meanwhile, her own body betrays her. Her heart, now conflated with the tulips, opens and closes its bowl of red blooms, as if she is flowering against her will. This involuntary blooming mirrors the tulip's forced vitality, suggesting her body is complicit in her suffering. The warm and salt water she tastes recalls both tears and the sea, linking her pain to something vast, ancient, and inescapable. The final line, a country far away as health, hints at a lost, unreachable state of wholeness, emphasizing her exile from peace. The last stanza marks the peaks of the tulip's tyranny. They are no longer just observed, they reconfigure her world, turning her heart into their accomplice and her body into a battleground. The poem's central tension crystallizes here. The more life asserts itself, Tulip's heartbeat, the more she longs for the silence of death. So this is it for today. We will continue to discuss the history of American English literature. Please stay connected with the discourse. Thanks and regards.